Hello, everyone, and welcome today for Visualize Esports, creating a spectator sport using Pro AV solutions. My full name and title is Logan Hermes. I am the program manager here on our marketing department at D&H Distributing. I oversee the Pro AV solutions program, as well as the esports solutions program and the component solutions program. And today we're going to be talking about 2 out of 3 of those with Pro AV. Shout out to the program vendor sponsors here with our Pro AV program, which you can see. And then also shout out to our wonderful guests we'll have to talk about displays, to talk about specs and monitor solutions, starting esports programs with that in mind. And don't worry, if you're curious about how to start esports programs, we'll also do shout outs to our esports solution page at dnh.com/esports, where you can get a free consultation with Brandon, or sometimes Brandon and myself, on creating your own esports business and practice, or more importantly, going to our dnh.com/proav site to look at all of the display, monitor, network, and attached solutions that go with the solutions we'll talk about today from an EDU and, more importantly, gaming, community gaming, and esports front. Again, it's Logan Hermes. It's a pleasure to see you all here. And I'm going to introduce someone that some of you may know with Brandon Beyer, our senior sales specialist for esports. Take it away, Brandon.
Hey everybody, hope all are well today. Just to give a quick intro, quick background on myself, I've been working in the esports space about 4 years now. Been here at D&H a little over a year, and I'm sure some of the people on here already know me or have gotten a chance to talk or do a consultation at some point. But here's a resource for all, and started so far at least 100 programs since I've come to D&H, and over 300 in total in the K through 12 space since I've been doing this. So happy to help you all with any questions, technical or non-technical, programs or non-programs. And Logan and I make a great team, so we're here to help.
Awesome. And yeah, he is right. We definitely, I'd say maybe like 4 or 5 calls a week, just talking about esports programs, whether they're new, current, how to establish, what technology is needed. And we have other teams cross business as well, especially on our Pro AV side, figuring out all of the other external needs and building out projects for you as well. Now, I have the great pleasure, because I've known Travis for a very, well, I say a mediocre amount of time, but enough time in esports where it's relevant. But Travis Yang, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. First off, pleasure being here, Logan. Appreciate that. My name is Travis Yang. I am currently the Director of Esports here at Wichita State University. Been esports for a few years now. When I was in college competing, and now in a director role. I've worked as the assistant esports coach up at Ashland University in Ohio for about 2 years, and then as the head esports coach down with Texas A&M San Antonio from about 2020 to 2022. So I'm just super excited to be here, and hopefully we can get you all some good information.
Perfect. The low ball question, the underhand throw, and we'll start with you, Travis, is what got you into the current career path, or what would you say would be that defining moment, or maybe even that thought that you're like, I can do this gaming, community gaming, maybe arena building or coaching thing as a career. Do you mind sharing that with us?
Yeah, it kind of started, the interest started in high school, right? As for a lot of kids, right? When you're gaming. For me, one thing I found a really huge passion in was not necessarily competing so much as the managing part, being able to help support my friends and my teammates, and negotiating the sponsorships, the partnerships, to secure the funding, to send them to events so that they could compete, right, and represent and pursue things that they were passionate in. And so it was I was very fortunate, but it was a natural transition to go into collegiate, right? Because as a coach, as a director, that's exactly what you're doing, right? You're supporting your students in their passions, helping them learn, helping them grow academically and competitively, as well as in the interests that come along with esports and the auxiliary side of things. But that was the transition, and I'm still living it right now. And it's definitely a really nice feeling to be able to go to work every day and see the impact that you're having on the students.
Perfect. Now, Brandon, very similar question. What got you into gaming? I've heard it, I think, twice today already, but bring it back for all of us. Why is working in gaming so impactful for you, and what thought made you get started?
Yeah, so I've been a gamer for 20 years. And I think my first job in high school, first job in high school, was working at a GameStop. So, to bring it all the way from there, in a retail space and bring it all the way to here, helping people, understand each game or finding like that right game for somebody, and then having that person come in, afterwards and saying, "Oh, this was like so much fun, so great. Like what a great story, or what great gameplay." That's what started. And I was 16, right? 16, 17 years old doing that. And then coming into this space about 3.5, 4 years ago at this point, and having a company ask me, "Hey, can you talk to schools and say, take your knowledge that you have, your technical experience, your sales ability, all that stuff, and just help, kind of coach them in a matter, and say, this is how you can start a program, from start to finish. This is the technology you'll need, and this is what will help you be successful." Knowing that I'm helping impact schools to grow programs and start programs, which then in turn can help, younger students and younger kids get into college that might have not had that opportunity, or find a career path that wasn't very open to them, is so rewarding. So it's a lot of fun to work in this space day in and day out.
That's awesome. And we'll get into the technical aspects in a second. From my experience, as I've ranted about, and you'll find that with a lot of folks that want to be champions of their program, whether it be in a school district or whether it be in someone that is an admin that's really excited about gaming. Maybe they've read 4 or 5 different articles and they say, "Oh, this would be really great for my school district," or "This would be really great for our college," or maybe our D3 or CTE technical institution. For me, I was master's degree in higher education in my last year of my master's. I played competitive collegiate Hearthstone and Overwatch at that time. And I finally just go, I'm just going to write my thesis on how to start collegiate esports programs. And it all kind of blossomed from there. Started the first one in Minnesota, very similar to kind of a Travis timeline. I like the aspect of supporting, right? You want to be able to support the teams that are learning and growing through programs that maybe you're building or facilitating with an overall institution, or maybe it's just an amateur team and you're really going at it. But as we go back to technical side, Brandon, and as I put the first polling question up, Brandon and Travis, and we'll start with Travis first, could you elaborate on the first arena that you ever saw, right? And then the first arena in comparison that maybe you'd help build, advocate for equipment, whether it be in an institution or not. What displays or monitors were you suggesting? And I'm going to throw out this first polling question as well, because I feel like it's important to ask those around us, did you go curved? Did you go uncurved? And kind of what was your decision making behind that, Travis?
Yeah, so facility-wise, the first one I think I saw was Columbia College over in right next to University of Missouri, and they were one of the first varsity programs in the nation at that time. And I believe their facility was hopefully get this right, I think it was like a renovated men's soccer locker room that they had kind of renovated. And they had the lighting and a basic setup. It was very cramped, not a lot of room to work out, move around. But it had the basic equipment. The first facility that I was able to actually help be a part of in planning was over at Ashland. And that was also a renovation. It was on the bottom floor of the library, but we had a lot more room to work with, and we were able to choose kind of how we wanted to position things around the hardware purchases, right, when it comes to monitors and peripherals. And so leading into, right, what did we actually look at for the monitors when it comes to gaming in a competition setting? Obviously, there's lots of things that go into just any monitor in general, right? Some things you realize later on, some things you realize earlier on. For example, can the monitor be mounted, right? Can you put it on an arm? What does the base of the monitor look like? Some monitors, right, when it comes to gaming, for FPS gamers, for example, they have large mouse movements. They want to be able to move their mouse and make sure it doesn't hit the base. And if some monitor, their bases are larger, and you can run into issues there. Refresh rates. 144 hertz being kind of industry standard when it comes to esports and competition. And now we kind of see the advent of 240 hertz and even up now, I think even in the 300 range. But when you talk to students and you experience it, sometimes you'll notice that, that jump from 60 to 140 is huge. But that jump from 140 to 240, not necessarily worth it, depending on, how much money you have to work with, and is it cost effective, and, what your students prefer. Curved monitors versus uncurved. Generally, I've stuck with your standard kind of uncurved monitors. But you could go on for days. But maybe one other thing to throw out there.
I do want to hinge on that,
yep.
Because Brandon, do these poll results? We got 30% curved, we got 23%, uncurved. Does this shock you? And more importantly, when you're talking with folks about monitor solutions, what would you recommend?
I mean, you're seeing curved screens start to kind of fall off, right? It's really starting to get into the ultra wide space, which is a whole another topic that we're not going to get into, right? But when it comes to your standard 24/27 that you're seeing in the esports space, regardless of 140, regardless of 240, regardless of 360 hertz, I still always recommend a flat screen at this point. The whole reason that curved screens and curved monitors came out, and a lot of people say it was a marketing scheme, is for immersion, right? And when you're playing, like an FPS or something like that, it's really not to be about immersion. It's how much screen space you can fit from eye to eye, right? You want to be able to see the whole screen. So if I have to turn my head and just to get a different field of view, you're taking away from, a possible shot being made or whatever it is. So, as somebody who's played competitive Counter-Strike for a long time, I've stuck with a flat screen, and I'm honestly shocked at the results of that poll. So
I think I am too, and that's why there'll be more polling questions. I appreciate all that put their time and input in there, but from our perspective, and Travis, I'm going to harken us back to, I think it was summer 2020. It was the NACE coaches Valorant tournament. What monitor were you playing on when you cracked our team to victory? It really was. But were you on flat? Were you on generic, what you had at home?
That's a great question. I think it's like an Asus. It's one of the original 144 hertz monitors. And as I say that, it's your standard flat panel. It's nothing fancy. It's 140 hertz. Yep. And to my left, I have a curved 27-inch monitor that I had bought and intended to use as my main one. But just like Brandon said, when it came to Counter-Strike, that's one of my main games. I tried it out, and after a week or 2 weeks, I'm like, I can't do this for the exact reasons Brandon said. Those little differences, right? Even if you push the monitor back or bring it closer, the extra inches on the side cause your eyes to have to shift a little bit more to the left and right, and that adds up. And so when you're in these high-level competition events, it's almost unacceptable. And so when you look at tournament standards for ESL, DreamHacks, it's pretty much always 24-inch standard flat panel.
Perfect. I appreciate you cueing us in on that, because another part of esports, especially even community gaming, right? I think let's pull ourselves out of the esports mantra for a second. Esports is competitive gaming that's usually spectated, through displays or through a Twitch stream or a live event. And let's kind of move us to community-centered gaming, right? Parks and Rec is looking to expand their activity offerings, right? They see a fancy word that's esports, but what they're really looking for is community gaming. They're looking for facilitation on how do we get the students that are inside 80% of the time to maybe come to our community center and experience games with those around them. When we talk about peripherals, right, and we talk about like large format displays, where we talk about cabling or networking, and especially for Travis and Brandon, who have helped set up like larger arenas or even smaller 6 PC setups, right? What do you think is the one challenge that isn't components based, right? That isn't like just the unit of arena setup? Because I would argue, and I'll throw this to Brandon here, I would argue that setup is challenging because of the networking. Because of that, where are we putting the screens? And more importantly, like, how is everyone going to fit in a space where it traditionally wasn't built for them? If you want to elaborate that, Brandon.
Sure. I think can you rephrase that one a little bit differently?
Yeah. So when you're building an arena, like a 6-person arena in a space like a Parks and Rec, or a community center that wasn't traditionally built for gaming, besides just the tower or maybe the mobility laptop they have, what challenges are those folks going to face when setting up those areas?
So I think the big thing right now is a lot of these community centers, at least locally. I live in small town New Hampshire, right? They don't necessarily have like a dedicated computer space, right? Like a school does nowadays. Some of them do, but a lot of them don't, right? They might not have the funding. They might have never gone that route, or tried to teach computer literacy like you see at some of these community centers. So I think finding the space and then kind of sectioning that off, right, into an actual room, into a space. Now, I've seen, believe it or not, some parks and recs take part of their basketball court, right? You see some of these massive basketball courts with, bleachers all set up and stuff like that, or old school bleachers. And there's maybe like 30 people sitting out there, but they're using up this massive amounts of space, right? So I think the big thing that I've seen, the difficult part is finding that space. Just because the kind of idea of a Parks and Rec or a Boys and Girls Club or a community center really started so long ago, right? When we were still talking physical contact sports all the time, your basketballs, doing a dodgeball tournament, stuff like that, where the gymnasium was the most important part, not a computer literacy room, right? So it's interesting to see how somebody finds the extra space to put stuff there. That's definitely the most difficult part.
And then to Travis, because you've been at multiple institutions, you brought up Ashland, right? Texas A&M, and now you're at Wichita. Have you had to reuse rooms that already had like maybe TV displays set up, or maybe you wanted to go add another large, like hey, I want digital signage here, or maybe there needs to be more advertising for recruitment. Where have you struggled when it comes to kind of building out those spaces in locations that, again, were not originally meant to house this?
Yeah, pretty much in every institution I've been at, it's been some type of repurposed space. Renovations have definitely been a necessity. When we talk about kind of barriers or challenges that we have to go through, where can you pull data from? Where can you pull power from? When you talk about a 24 PC facility, right, that's a decent amount of power. Usually if it's a repurposed room, it's not going to have that pre-existing, right? And that's just power, right? The drops, and sometimes you're not able to pull it through pre-existing infrastructures. You have to actually go and pull an additional. You have to sometimes dig up and do a little construction. Same thing with data, right? You have to purchase the switches to kind of gear up that room and make it ready. There's a lot that goes into it. I will say, towards your previous question on Brandon, I just wanted to echo real quick. Absolutely. The space is a huge component. Number one, finding the space and locking that in, but then using that space effectively. I think, as an interesting example from Brandon, right, where you could have too much space sometimes, and it's like kind of feels awkward. And sometimes, like the Columbia College example, and spaces might be too cramped. And then you want to obviously kind of maximize the amount of PCs you can put in while still maintaining the student experience. There's just a lot that you have to take into account.
And I think that brings up a lot of questions. If anyone in the audience has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A about like spaces, even when it comes to like cabling, or if you have any questions about kind of how that network goes. I know, especially for some folks that are going to the schools and doing it on their own, doing that installation, the buildings were built 50, 60, 70 years ago, and they need that extra kind of oomph to get what the large point of this webcast is to really understand the visualization of how are students going to look at this, not as players maybe, or maybe parents of students that are coming into an institution or a high school and say, this is valuable, right? Or, oh, that's cool, right? A lot of that is done through screens, and a lot of that is done through people that are working adjacent. And so I'll throw this, I come from a broadcast background, but I'll throw this to Travis too, because he has a deep voice. But the biggest part is, I did amateur League of Legends broadcasting when I was in grad school, all the way in EU, right? All the way in Europe, and they needed someone that knew how to speak English. And I was like, awesome, I can do that. They had their English caster team there, and if you go look up and do research on that right now, there's it's grown a lot, since 2018, 2019. But back then, I was 7 a.m. in a Wisconsin dorm room. I had a small, like a workstation laptop, and I had crappy headphones, and I was just trying to get my voice across the Atlantic Ocean. That's really all it was. I want to talk about accessibility for people that aren't having the skill or maybe even the team management experience, Travis, that can come in and like what career paths can they take that maybe one of the folks on the call can maybe take back to a school or maybe take back to a district or an athletics director and say, hey, esports isn't just about the folks in the seats and the administrator, or the coach or the director overseeing the folks in the gaming chairs. But how do you expand those career opportunities to other positions? And what would those positions be?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And certainly in the past 1 to 2 years, this idea of esports being more than competition has grown a lot. There's definitely been a couple schools out there that from the get-go have been championing that idea. Just to throw out there, a Boise State, for example, from the get-go in their facility build out, they took into account, hey, we're going to have a competition area, but we also want to have a viewer area, a production area for our students, an interview area, right? Going into it, right, with the idea of applied learning, experiential learning, right? Hands-on learning, basically, for those students, right? And it could even be the case that some of those students, they are good at the games and they love to compete, but they find more enjoyment in the auxiliary positions, right? In commentating, in team managing, in production, in stream production, in graphic design. And so, when we look at a lot of programs right now that have been around for a few years or programs that are getting created, there's kind of a race right now to retrofit and go back and see, hey, how can we find a space? How can we take our pre-existing space and then carve out something for a production setup so that we can reach those students and make that a part of our program. So there's a huge need for that right now. In fact, that's something that here at Wichita State that we're trying to do. We have this space that was kind of built with competition in mind, but not necessarily for those auxiliary positions. So now we have to go and as a director and look at, okay, what production equipment do I need? What I have to do the research and what monitors are needed, what kind of microphone setups, what peripherals all come with that. Do I need soundproofing, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of a nationwide trend right now.
Perfect. And Brandon, as I've just pulled the poll question up, when you are talking to really anyone, especially as our go-to esports specialist here at DNH, how often do you bring up broadcast spaces when it comes to gaming, when it comes to community engagement, and the close relation kind of to those in the actual sale?
I think in the higher ed space, right, in the collegiate space, it's pretty often, right? You're talking probably 80% of the time it's at least talked about. It might not be the first year that's happening, especially for a brand new program, but it's at least a discussion that happens, right? And we kind of talk about it and go over some things. In the K through 12 space, I think it's starting to get there. It really depends on the school and the district, right? How in tune they are with STEM careers or broadcast careers. I was very fortunate. I went to a high school of 1,600 people, right? We had this career center that had everything from an IT lab where we learned to network cables and stuff like that. We had a broadcast lab with, top end equipment and brand new Macs and stuff like that. It's a very fortunate thing, right? We even had a chef part of it, like a chefing part. You could learn how to professionally cook in a true professional grade kitchen. So it's definitely a topic that's coming up a lot more. And just to Travis's point too, to give another example, take a look at Full Sail University. They're based at a Florida short-term school. A lot of the things that some students are going into college nowadays, they're like, I don't know if I want to be in school for 4 years. You go to Full Sail's, program, it's 2.5 years. They've got an esports true arena built out that allows students to go from all points of view, the cameras, the microphones, shoutcasting, being able to play the games, set up, all sorts of different stuff. And it's just really cool. As I've talked to their program director, a handful of times, She's very proud of what she started, and I think they have a great example of, hey, this is how you can look at it as careers in esports.
And that's kind of exactly what we're hopefully trying to frame whenever we go into a conversation, when we're trying to start that program, or maybe even trying to say, hey, I see that you did really well at maybe a state esports or gaming competition. This is awesome. Have you ever thought about expanding your program? Because Travis, a couple word answer here. Are there more students that are interested in the auxiliary positions? Like you probably garner, I'd either say equal or maybe a little more from my experience. But from your experience, do you see there's like an equal balance of students that are wanting to compete and others that are wanting to support the competitors?
Oh, absolutely. At least equal. And I think that's probably always been the case, right? But as I mentioned a few years ago, programs kind of only catered to the competition side of things. So now that programs are recognizing this demand and this, in these auxiliary positions, and they're building out things, that's just more incentive, right, for these students to see that and to apply and to try to get into it. Because, a lot of students want to be involved, and a lot of them recognize that, hey, I'm not good enough to compete, but I'm a huge fan and I still want to help. I want to contribute to my high school's program, to my collegiate program, and I want to get these skills and develop these skills that, if they're interested in pursuing a career in the industry, this is the best way to do it, right? Just to throw out there, for example, I have a student who's a graphic designer. That's his major. He works on that for our team, and it goes perfectly with his field of study. So he's literally getting that experiential learning. Throw that word around all the time, but that is literally it. So when you go and you talk to faculty and you talk to administration, you can literally point to students and say, this is what we're doing for them, right? That's what universities, that's the whole goal of an institution.
The case studies write themselves, right? Sometimes sports management, when it comes to, graphic design, experiential learning, when it comes to communication and PR and marketing studies for an institution, esports can be the all-encompassing, I want to do more than just what a traditional STEM case study would be. But it is team management, right? It is full on. You could even get to sports psychology, right? Like there are so many avenues. Scott, we'll get to your question at the end because that's a large answer. But Travis, if you want to answer his question in the Q&A about setting up leagues, while I transition Brandon into another question. Because I love talking about HSCL and Play versus Forever. But I'll have you tackle that one, Travis. When it comes to platforms and community, Brandon, you're an enjoyer of video game. I am an enjoyer of video games. Community, competitive, whatever it may be. I have 120 hours into Elden Ring, and I love it. And I'm not good at it, which is great. But when it comes to watching, right, that's the other component. It's great. We have LCDs, right? We have, large format displays. We got TVs, we got tablets. We got, even on our phones, I watch a lot of streaming on my phone. What platform do you normally watch on? Is it that Twitch? Is it that Facebook Live? Do you follow content creators at different places? Or, are you what my mom would be, is a Facebook Live person, where there's still a lot of content creators on there. I just don't frequent it generationally. So for you, how do you kind of engage in that on a business and a leisure level?
So as somebody, and shout out to Ergotron, right, who has 3 monitors in front of them right now, I mostly watch at my computer. It's where I spend most of my time, right, whether it's between work, gaming after work, stuff like that. So it's really between that and then I would say maybe 25% of my phone, whether it's cooking or doing whatever. If I want to watch content, it's on my phone. I'm not a tablet user, so I don't have that experience. But again, most of the time I'm multitasking. I might not be fully focused on somebody's Twitch stream, right? It's something that's sitting in the background like music would be, instead of music, or checking out a new game that launched. I've lost hype, I would say, for release day games nowadays. So I like to watch others play and say, okay, does that look fun, or does it look like something that I'd stay away from? So
Nice. And Travis, I assume you have to, right? I assume you have to either be on one of these platforms or in a Discord chat watching someone play because they're streaming their own. Kind of what's your take on how you engage with it as a director of a program?
Yeah, I mean, Twitch, huge for our broadcast, right? We just talked about the importance of production and integrating that. Then it's about how can you get that out there? How do you get that out in a way that is accessible for students to view, whether they're there in your facility or across the country or overseas, something like that. Twitch certainly has been a big aspect for us. In terms of, I mean, obviously you can live stream to other platforms as well, like Facebook and YouTube gaming has gotten a lot bigger in the past few years, but Twitch is king in the space. So that's kind of what we tailor our broadcasts towards. And that's what we train our students on. We talk about software that's needed. There'll be a Streamlabs, there'll be a studio. When it comes to broadcasting, it really is centered around those few services.
Nice. And the results, actually, this is, I think, one of the first times DNH has taken a poll from audience just about streaming services. And I love to see it. I love to see the varied method of engagement. 30% no. We have yes, but only for outside of work reasons, which honestly is kind of me. Back when I was a coach, to Travis's point, I'm gonna watch other teams play. I had watched film, right, and I'd done that to prep film and tell some teams like, hey, this is who we're playing next week. Their stream is on, like, it'll be here for 3 days or however long they'll have it on for. Or if they let Twitch kind of phase it out, I think it's 2 weeks timeline. But it's good to see that we've 22.6 that are watching content for work and non-work related reasons. I think that's it's incredible, and I'd like to see that change because I would have guessed that. From my standpoint, and it will definitely influence kind of decisions moving forward when it comes to how are you, as someone that is looking to satisfy a school with equipment that'll create and then keep a program going with longevity, understanding that you are a consumer of this, they are also probably a consumer of this, so you have to keep that in mind when you're developing the accessories, so the mics, the monitors, the streaming sets. I'd even say switches as well, right? That being said, I do want to move into Betty's question. So Betty, thanks for joining. Betty Gomez coming in, and she asks, what is the biggest challenge to include with esports? What is the biggest challenge with esports to include when requesting or allocating budget? And so Travis, I have my own take. I've done this a few times, but Travis, for you, what is that biggest challenge when you're including esports in a budget? Like when you've heard from admin or an athletic director saying, well, I've heard your ask, but these are the hurdles. What are usually those hurdles?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'll be honest, it's a really hard question and something that I almost want to think about it a little bit more, but
well, do you want to chime in, Brandon? Because I think we have.
Well, let me simmer on this real quick.
I got you. Brandon, is there a challenge that you've seen constantly when we're on calls with schools, or when you specifically are, that evolve around budget in esports?
I think it's lack of knowledge at this point, and not in like in a negative way, right? But in an esports lab that must cost $1 billion, right? Not literally. I'm just using a big number, but you can get started for my number used to be, I think it was like 30 to 35 grand. It's gone up a little bit now with the way that product availability is and the price of computer components and stuff like that. But I think even $50,000 gets you a really decent lab at the end of the day, which sounds like a lot of money, but in the EDU space, I mean, we're spending millions on Chromebooks, right? So how do we find that budget? I think it's working with, a school or a district's grant writer. A lot of districts these days have grant writers, and some people just don't realize the teachers that are trying to start these programs just might not know about them. And just then tying this whole thing into STEM learning and understanding, hey, I can now use that, $150,000. I can use part of that budget to pay for my esports lab now. it's wild to see how many large STEM grants are coming out in the space now. So,
And back to Travis, have you simmered?
Yes, I have simmered, and Brandon put it in a very polite way, which is educating, and just informing kind of what the real costs are and kind of what you can get for the value. Again, like he put, some people go in thinking I'm gonna need a 500 grand investment or something crazy. That's not the case, right? But also you can't go in thinking, if I just invest 10K that I'm going to be able to get 30 PCs. That's also not how it works. So just going in and kind of managing expectations and informing them, educating them about, what are the bare minimums, right? What are you trying to accomplish? I won't go too far into it. Maybe this is more for the startup of a program, for example, but, a lot of it depends on where the program is going to be housed, right? What are the goals behind that, right? If you're in athletics, if you're in campus rec, if you're in student life, they kind of have different underlying objectives, and that's going to depend a lot. That's going to affect a lot in terms of what you can ask when it comes to a budget. And then a lot of times that'll also affect where that money comes from in the budget. But yeah.
And it's I think you both said it beautifully. It's definitely comes to the prioritization of the school initially, but also the biggest challenge when requesting and allocating that amount is coming into what am I sacrificing from what I would have already spent, right? Most schools, when they're allocating that budget, just put on my master's in higher ed here, Pat, for a second. Most schools, when they're allocating that budget, they really want, from a higher education perspective, don't quote me on this for K-12, but what they really want is they already have their initiative planned out. When you bring in esports and gaming into the fold, you might have been pitching it for 2 years or a year and a half or 6 months, and they still haven't allocated it yet because you now still need to get 3 POs that, to Brandon's point, they're going to have to be refreshed. And a school's budgetary timeline sometimes has multiple expired POs that now change that budget date, right? I think stagnating of prices, I think, computer chip shortage hurts. But I also think if they haven't thought about the space, going back to, monitor arms and desks and networking, doing the 30 to 40K ask is great until you realize now we got to bring in a team in to install, right? At a school level. Now we got to, how are we cabling? Do we bring in Ethernet? Do we have to go get fiber connection from the city, right? That just adds extra cost. And so it is fully compiling that together. And to lastly, and to Brenda's point, making sure you can take advantage of that grant writer that is connected. I'm going to move to one of our last candid Travis, Brandon, and myself talking points today, which comes on the fact of mobile devices. On the back of streaming is the fact of how are folks consuming that? How are parents consuming it? How are your admins going to consume the content that this team is creating? Not only like headphones and earbuds, but also like right in front of them. I currently watch Twitch mainly on my phone, and it is the size of my hand. And my hand is the size of unregistered blank phone 3. It's pretty big. But to other folks' point, there's also mobility. There's tablets that you can watch it on that have those applications that you can still get the same viewing experience, same sound quality for any of the platforms you recently have voted on. But for Brandon and Travis, and I'll float this to Brandon, are you seeing a rise in folks asking for mobility solutions, whether it be mobility laptops, whether it be for that gaming and that screen, that they can connect to a monitor solution? Or are they really just going for, I want a large format display that I can show in a viewing area, and they're not going to get maybe a tablet that is sit next to them in a compartment where they can just sit down and watch it by themselves. Are you seeing any change in that as we move towards more mobile gaming competitive with Wild Rift specifically? Card games like Hearthstone and Legends of Runeterra, Magic the Gathering. Are you seeing the transition from viewers watching it from large displays to smaller displays, Brandon?
I don't think as much because realistically, the graphic quality of mobile games has come so far in the past year or 2 or 3 that it used to be when you blew it up on a big screen, right? The resolution would deteriorate. It wouldn't look as good. So the presentation quality would diminish. And I think with specifically Wild Rift, which literally is League of Legends quality graphics, just on a mobile device, watching it on the big screen, right? Watching it in the auditorium, or watching it on a 55, 65-inch flat screen that's, in the lab for spectators. That's just going to be the same, right? That way you can have, 25 people in a room watching on a 50-inch TV or 60-inch TV and rooting their team on, or having everybody in the auditorium and watching it on, a 140-inch projection screen or 200-inch projection screen. It's more about just being able to see it than to and have it still as a community instead of having people individually staring at a smaller screen, right? So
yeah, and to Travis's point, with students, with parents, you're around them a lot more than we are. Are you seeing any switch from I watch it on my HDMI, from my computer to my TV in front of me, or I'm only watching our teams play on our computers? Or do you have families that interact with the visualization of their students in a different way?
Yeah, we're seeing it. In a facility, we'll watch it. Sometimes we'll even run a direct line from one of the PCs to one of the monitors in the facility for display, so that other students can watch it. Again, referencing Twitch, we get that out there so that parents can watch it from wherever they're at. But to kind of bring it back to what Brandon was saying, on the flip side of that, right? Brandon was talking about the viewership experience on the competitive side, right? You think about the students that are actually playing those games. Of course, they still ultimately have to play on those devices. If it's a mobile game, it's a Wild Rift or a PUBG Mobile, right? They still have to play on the phones. And certainly you can screen share that or cast that to a larger display. But I think, right, when we talk about smaller handheld displays, an iPad, something like that, that's actually something I'm starting to see a little bit more with some directors when they look at, hey, I want to bring in a mobile game. I want to bring in a Hearthstone. But Hearthstone is a card game that doesn't necessarily require having a full PC setup. What is the way I can integrate that? Well, having a tablet, a handheld device fits that perfectly, right? Or it can even play it on a mobile device, and you can cross-play and play against people on PCs. So there's no issues there. But that's a neat way that's cost-effective, right, for programs to bring in an entire game. It saves space, and you don't need to use up the pre-existing infrastructure to accommodate that.
Perfect. And let me push this back from the audience. Yeah, I agree with the audience point. I understand that it can change. I think you asked me a year ago about mobile solutions, even mobile gaming, right? I would have been like, no, like even Hearthstone, right? Who was pretty predominantly mobile game. And as someone that had a good Hearthstone team, a couple of years ago, I was like, yeah, but none of them played on their phones, right? They still did the client. They still were at their unit. But now that Wild Rift, especially because I live in Minnesota, is coming up in partnerships with Riot Games, and they're starting to get more into that mobile gaming mindset. I think, this is just me, as long as schools and admins remain open to the abilities for folks that don't have an at-home $2,000 unit or maybe an at-home mobile gaming PC to still come into college and say, I want to excel at these games. Do you have them? Do you offer them? Right? And then being able to meet the audience where they're at and say, I know you're probably going to watch this on a tablet. Or if you are, these are the ratios you're going to see it at. If you do want to watch it, come to our viewing arena, right? Where we do have a larger display, where we can, let you see what it actually looks like to the folks that are looking at it in a competitive sense. That was my little pop-up question for the day. But now we get to go into audience questions. So I'll scroll down to the front. First of all, I don't want to, if Joey is still here, Diablo, great game. If you are in the middle of playing Diablo 3, I think it's Diablo 3's new season, I have two friends that are on the top 100 leaderboard, and they tell me about it every day. And then when it comes to Scott Reed's question, is it easy to set up leagues instead of using HSCL or Play Versus? Now, we work with Generation Esports. HSCL is a great partner, and we all have probably our individual thoughts on Play Versus. But I believe, and you all can chime in on this, you can easily set up a community league without the extra accolades, right? HSCL is there and Play Versus are there to say that you can compete on a national level. You can compete against all of these other students and you can have a great time. But there are colleges out there, there are high schools out there that set up their own schedules, set up their own competition and manufacture that in their district, in their state, in their region, to still provide a unique competitive experience for their players. Is there anything else you two want to add on leagues?
I'll just echo that. I think HSCL Generation Esports, they do a great job. And if you want to bring them in and have their expertise and kind of their structure, certainly. I like their approach in that they don't just come in and take it over, right? It's still your event and they're kind of there to help facilitate that. But towards your main point there, right? If you're just trying to put on a league within your institution, within your high school, or just kind of within your district, actually, I would recommend go reach out to those people who are from the traditional sports industry, right? You may have athletic directors and their staff and their offices, people who can put on seasons, who do that all the time. That's their job, right? To put on a football season and to keep track of games and schedule games. It's not that different from esports, right? You have teams that need to play and they need to be assigned times, and they go through the same hurdles that traditional athletics teams do.
I appreciate that. We'll go on to Scott. Had another great question about when a vendor receives a call from a school, is a vendor handling their needs or passing them on? And I think it varies from vendor to vendor. We had Jeff Palumbo on last year. If you go check out our Leveraging Esports, it's at DNH TV. We had Jeff Palumbo on, and he talked about how he responds to emails. And the biggest thing is he wants the full ask in the email. He needs, your event should already be set up, right? Or your team should already be there. All you need to have is that full ask. And more importantly, like where they can just plug and play. Like where can a vendor just go in, say, oh yeah, this is valuable, and doesn't have to do a lot of the legwork with you. If you can set up that in an email, you'll probably have a better chance of getting a response, but it's probably not 100% guaranteed from a vendor standpoint. Now, I don't want to speak on behalf of all vendors. Some may react differently. But from a reseller point, or maybe a distribution point, Brandon, is there any feedback you'd have for a school that is directly reaching out and looking for assistance?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's what I do, right? Is day in and day out do consultations for all of our wonderful partners that we work with. So I think if you ever have the question or if the topic ever comes up, reach out to us. That's truly what I enjoy doing, is helping these schools understand how many resources there are out there now for them to use, and help them understand and break it down to a very tangible topic instead of, trying to find all the information online. Because there's not really a great one-stop shop, I think. Right now on, the internet, you have to do, hours of reading where, give me 20 minutes, I might be able to break it down for you pretty quick, 25 minutes, So that's one thing. I did want to speak real quick, Logan, on Scott's first question. As far as setting up leagues, right? Locally, we have this wonderful free program called Discord now, right? And Discord's been around for almost a decade, which is crazy to say. I can't believe I've been using Discord that long. It's like 8 years old. You can create a full-fledged community on Discord, support it. There's voice chat, there's text chat. You can, sort out rooms for the 5 students that are competing and have a spectator room. It's really a one-stop little app that you could start taking your, your community and really just blow it up, right? And start those tournaments and have people communicating back and forth, so.
And if you're looking for something bigger, right, feel free to reach out to us. But yeah, definitely Discord or any voice application you use. I don't know if you still use TeamSpeak, but you can definitely still find ways to navigate that. Lori, I know you personally. You could ask me that question later about projects being phased out to offset capital. Brandon and I would be more than happy to help you out with that. But for everyone else, I want to say thank you very much for joining us today on Visualize Esports. I do want to shout out to our large amount of Pro AV program vendor sponsors that have made this webcast possible. You can see them on the screen here, but more importantly, if you're curious about how all of those fit into a general Pro AV or broadcast solution, or if you're curious on, more importantly, how to set up your own, you can easily go to dnh.com/proav and contact our ProAV sales specialist team. If you're looking for Brandon, don't worry, they'll connect you directly to Brandon. Just lay out the scope of your project. Say, this is what we're looking to build, and we're working with a school that wants to broadcast or wants to really showcase, or a Parks and Rec that really wants to understand how this gets seen to an audience, because we have the folks that want to play the games. Maybe they're still playing from home, but we want to be able to showcase this larger audience. And we saw this cool webcast, and we wanted to stop by. If you're more interested in the esports aspect, don't be afraid. We still have that, dnh.com/esports, with a whole different set of vendors and a new webcast that'll come out in May 26th, I believe. Yep. And we will be talking about program creation at the high school and college level. A very simple, if you want that one-stop shop of how to start a program and how to try to make it either competitive or community, that's what that's going to be about. In a month, get on our email list. We'll definitely send you a notification. And lastly, I want to say thank you to Travis Yang, Brandon Beyer. Do you have any last words for our wonderful folks at home?
I'll just say it's a pleasure to be here. This is kind of not something that I usually have the opportunity to speak on, but I think it's certainly one of the most important parts to, especially building out a program, right? Talk about the equipment that's necessary, the funding that comes with that, and how does that affect the student experience. Usually these are things you kind of learn throughout the years and you figure that out. It's not something a lot of people are cognizant at the start of building out something. You're not looking that far along the road. So the fact that, you know, this many people are interested in learning about this, I think it speaks towards the industry, and it's a good sign. So appreciate it.
And I just say, you know, thanks everybody for your questions that came in. I absolutely love doing these and talking about this subject because it's just something that I live and breathe day in and day out. And I get to meet people like Travis, and you know, I've met people like Logan, and get to work with those wonderful individuals. So thanks everybody for attending, and I hope everybody enjoyed this.
Awesome. Well, that'll end our webcast today. Thank you for joining in to DNH TV, Visualize Esports, creating a spectator sport using ProAV solutions. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and see us next time. Don't forget to sign up for Hershey Thread, which will be our Hershey show, June 15th. And if you haven't signed up for that, don't be afraid. Just go to dnh.com and go to our events page. We'll be able to find out everything you need to for signing up and going to our show in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful rest of your day.